There's two things I hate in this world: terrorists and pink dumbbells. Do not lift weights to burn calories. We lift weights to build muscle and build strength. And please, don't use these pink dumbbells. This leaf is the only exercise programming guide you'll need. Now, I'll explain this leaf a little bit later. I want to thank Orangetheory for making this educational series possible. Remember back in the very first episode, muscle equals health and excess body fat equals sickness. Well, in this episode, I'm going to be focusing on the muscle piece of this puzzle. Building muscle is extremely important. It will not only make you stronger, but the more muscle you have, the more bone mineral density you'll have as well. A lot of people believe that if you're a woman and you lift weights, it will make you build huge muscles. Well, let me tell you, lifting weights will not turn you into the Incredible Hulk. It's just not how the process works. We lift weights to get stronger and to build muscle. Now, when we have this as our guiding principle, it requires an intentional mindset on how to lift. Now, something else I want to say, and I want you to look into my eyes when I say this. We do not lift weights to burn calories. Burning calories is fine, but when people use lifting weights to burn a lot of calories, what happens is it leads to bad programming and bad programs that are not focused on building muscle and getting stronger. Some people would say that I'm shaming pink dumbbells, and I am. Now, let me give you a general example. If you can lift a weight more than 20 times, it's too light. Now, I know that there's research in premenopausal women that says that above 30 repetitions is not ideal. But I'm going to say, if you can lift a weight more than 20 times, it is not ideal. So in my research lab, that's exactly what we do. We program a lot of resistance training, and we never let our subjects go above 20 repetitions in one set. Now, there's nothing magical about 20 reps. I'm just giving that as general advice so that we're in the neighborhood where we want to be. So let's recap what we've discussed so far. Resistance training is the best form of exercise that you can do, particularly as you're going through menopause. And we know that you're going to lose muscle. Let's be strategic about how we're going to prevent that from happening. And lifting weights, resistance training, is key to this strategy. We know we want to lift relatively heavy weights to build muscle and strength. We do not lift weights to burn calories. If you do lift weights, you're not going to need a new wardrobe. Building muscle is a slow process. Let's pretend I'm wrong, and you're building these huge muscles because you started lifting weights. Well, you know what you could do? You could stop lifting weights. Your muscles will get smaller. But again, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've never seen that happen. I want to also give a little bit of context. If you can lift weights, you're healthy, you're feeling good, you need and should be lifting weight. But if you're not at a good place currently, let's say you're one of the train wrecks that we described earlier, then our focus is going to be getting you to a healthy place where you can lift weights. So in that sense, everything I'm going to talk about in this episode is aspirational. I want to get you to the point where you are lifting weights and you're doing it with all of the steps and strategies that I'm going to talk about in this episode. How do you make a resistance training plan? Well, what I like to do is look at this from a body part or muscle group perspective. So what we do is we divide the body into the lower body and upper body. So the lower body, what are the big muscle groups there? Well, we have the glutes, the quadriceps, the hamstrings, and the calves. In the upper body, we have chest, back muscles, shoulders, biceps, triceps, and abdominal muscles. And what's great about resistance training, it allows you to shape your body. If you want to shape your body in one direction or another, you just focus on exercises that will target that body part. If you were or are an athlete, I wouldn't train you from a body part or muscle group perspective. I would train you for movement patterns that are relative to your sport. My approach is, we know you're losing muscle mass during menopause, so let's focus on building muscle mass throughout your entire body. And I want to give you A warning before I get into the details of structuring an evidence-based resistance training program. And the warning is that a lot of unqualified trainers will try to overcomplicate this. They'll use fancy words like triphasic periodization or microcycle planning. That's just an attempt to overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be complicated. So everything we're going to do in this episode is giving you evidence-based strategies to create your own resistance training program and doing it in a manner that is simple and effective. Your entire program can be comprehensively designed with the simple acronym LEAF, LEAF. L stands for load, E stands for effort, A stands for amount, F stands for frequency. So let's start with L, or load. Load is simply how heavy is the weight that you're lifting. Now remember, just to be in the right neighborhood, we've already said that if you can lift the weight more than 20 times, it's too light. And if I were to lift this pink dumbbell, which you know I hate, I could lift it, I don't know, 50 times, 100 times, 140 times. We know this is too light for me. So here's some general recommendations. You should generally find a weight that you can lift between 6 and 12 repetitions. Now sometimes you'll lift weights that are heavier, 3 reps, 4 reps, 5 reps, especially if you're doing squats or deadlifts. Other times you might choose a weight that you can lift 15 to 20 times. More often than not, we're going to be lifting a weight between 6 and 12 repetitions. So that's where we're going to end with load. Now we go to effort. A lot of people will call this intensity. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift this. Earlier I said 6 to 12 times. So I'm going to go ahead and lift this 6 times. Great, I followed my own advice and I lifted it between 6 and 12 repetitions. I just did 6. I did good, right? Wrong. There's nothing magical about 6. When we're lifting weights, we also need to lift with high effort, meaning that as we approach 10 reps, or 6 reps in this case, lifting the weight becomes difficult. So here's a principle of your program. Effort is the most important attribute of your program. The effort you put into each set is based on a concept called failure. If you can't lift the weight for 1 more repetition, we call that failure. Do we need to train to failure on all sets? No, we do need to train close to failure on all of our sets. If you're not training close to failure, you're not stimulating that muscle for growth in an efficient manner. When you lift a weight, you want to keep lifting it until you think you can do 1 or maybe 2 more repetitions before you can't lift it anymore. When you first start, you might be off by more than 2 or 3 repetitions, but the more you lift, the better you'll get at this. All right, so that was load, and we looked at effort, and I'm actually going to, I don't know why I held this so long. As much as I can't stand pink dumbbells, I'm just gonna throw it away. Now we're gonna move to amount, the amount of lifting you should do. And this is usually categorized as over a week basis. Now, some people will refer to this as the volume of training that you're doing. For the first time, I want to say that this concept, the amount or volume that you're doing, is very individualized to you. Now, volume is a little different. This depends on your goals, your time, and what are you currently doing? What's your resistance training program currently comprised of? So this is why I recommend working with an evidence-based fitness professional who can help guide you on an appropriate amount of lifting volume. So how do we calculate volume? Well, this is where it's so simple. As long as you can count, you can calculate volume. You simply count the number of sets that you do for a muscle group or body part. And this is referred to as set volume. For example, let's say you go to the gym and you do 5 sets of dumbbell curls and 5 sets of leg presses. So what you've just done was 5 sets for your biceps and you did 5 sets for your quadriceps. You just count the number of sets where you went to near failure and you add them up. If you repeated that workout twice per week, 5 sets one day, 5 sets another day, that's 10 sets. And let's take it one step further. Let's say you worked out 3 days of that week and you did 5 sets Monday, 5 sets Wednesday, 5 sets Friday. You did 15 sets of work. So whatever muscle group you're lifting, where you take the set to near failure, just add that to your weekly set volume. And this system, by the way, is science-based. It's referred to as the set volume system. And this is how most exercise scientists prescribe their resistance training programs. It's how I prescribe all of my programs in my research lab. Now, I want to also give you a little bit of context into what's considered a low, a moderate, and a high amount of training volume. So if you're doing less than 10 sets per week for a body part, that would be considered low volume training. If you do between 10 and 20 sets per week, that's considered moderate volume training. And if you do 20 sets or more for a body part, that's considered high volume training. Now, if you can picture a bodybuilder, these men and women who they have pretty big muscles and they step on stage, what they're typically doing is high volume training. They're doing 20 or more sets per week for each of their body parts. Now, that's fine, but I want to make sure that we're aware you can make a ton of progress with low volume resistance training. As long as your effort is high, you don't have to be spending hours and hours in the gym. You can do low volume, even less than 10 sets per week, and still build muscle and strength. We're on to our last acronym, the letter F for frequency. Frequency is simply how many days should you lift? Well, the range of possibilities are from 1 day per week up to, I'll say 6 days per week. And I always like to give 1 day per week where you have complete rest. So I don't advise lifting 7 days per week. So the range that I'm going to present to you, 1 to 6 days per week. And what research has informed us is, as long as your volume or the amount of training is equated, it doesn't matter how you divide up that training over the course of a week. For example, training a body part 3 days per week is not better or worse than 2 days per week. Likewise, training a body part 6 days per week is no better or worse than training a body part 3 days per week. Now, we do want to avoid putting all of the volume, all of the amount of training for a particular body part on only 1 day of the week. For example, let's say you decided you were going to do 15 sets per week for your shoulders. What we would want to avoid is doing all 15 sets on only 1 day per week. It would be better to divide this up into 2 or 3 or more days per week. Let me give an example. Let's say you're lifting on Tuesday and Saturday. You would do 8 sets for your shoulders on Tuesday and 7 sets for your shoulders on Saturday. There's your 15 sets. Likewise, let's say you're going to lift Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 5 sets Monday, 5 sets Wednesday, 5 sets Friday. Still 15 sets, but you've divided it over 3 days per week. Research has shown avoiding 1 day per week is not ideal. 2 or more days per week, as long as the volume is the same, it really doesn't matter. So here's how my personalized coaching company determines your training frequency. What we do is we start with your schedule in terms of how many days per week you can train. How many days per week can you go to the gym? So once we have that information from you, we reverse engineer that and design the best program for you personally. If you're interested in getting information from my coaching team, just send me an email, bill@billcampbellphd.com. In the next episode, we're going to look at some advanced strategies to address muscle loss during the menopause transition. Here's how my personalized coaching company determines your training frequency. What we do first is get your schedule and your availability of how many days per week you can train and how long you can train for each session. Then what we do is we reverse engineer that into prescribing the best training program for you. It would do me no good and you no good to give you a program that's 5 days per week if you can only be in the gym 3 days per week. I would love to hear from you. Tell me what you're currently doing in the weight room. What works for you? What have you found that has built more muscle or strength for you? In the next episode, we're going to look at some advanced strategies on how to help address the loss of muscle mass that women will typically experience during the menopause transition. Big shout out to Hone Health and Orangetheory for making this series possible. Check out both of their links below. In the next episode, we're going to look at some advanced resistance training strategies to help maintain muscle mass and hopefully build extra muscle mass during the menopause transition. Oh, and don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel.